A dream to some.
A nightmare to others!
But I will give you a message. A message of death!
Oh yeah! Come out and play it!
Make no attempt to capture them. They must be exterminated.
Matron, take them away!
Stardust speaks to you.
Hello there, welcome to the start of a new season here of We Need to Talk About ... It's season 4, episode 1. Once again, we are the middle-aged movie boys. I am the Big Daddy D, David Mabley, and I got sugared turkles for Christmas.
Have you been to the doctors for them? And, as always, I am Luke Murphy, and I like a man with spirit.
Oh. This film that we're looking at for episode 1, I mean, this was always going to be a prime contender for our show. It's just the sort of type of film that we talk about. If anyone was to sort of ask us, right, okay, what kind of films do you cover on your channel? It's like, well, this would be an absolute...
This is basically it.
Yeah.
We were always going to do this.
Yeah.
So, Hawk the Slayer is a 1980s British sword and sorcery adventure film directed by Terry Marcel and starring Jack Palance in all his scenery-chewing glory, and John Terry. No, not that one. Not that John Terry. A different John Terry.
The story follows two warring brothers who fight to gain control of a magical sword. Brave warrior, the titular Hawk, is a man of courage, honour and bravery. A marked contrast with his cruel, perverse and hideously deformed older brother, Voltan, who wears a dark mask that makes him look nothing like a medieval Darth Vader, honest. And this is to disguise one half of his face. Entrusted with the magical mind sword, Hawk assembles a small group of fighters to help him rid the land of his powerful, evil brother.
Marcel had been working with Harry Robertson when they realised that they both were sword and sorcery fans, and inspired by Akira Kurosawa's Yojimbo, Sergio Leone's Fistful of Dolls. The result was an English version of the story set in the Dark Ages. Marcel has stated that it's not originally intended to include magic at all, and was supposed to be a historical film. While writing the script, he then introduced the magical Mind Stone, changing the overall nature of the film.
Now, shot in 6 weeks in Buckinghamshire for a mere £600,000, which was about $2 million, Hawk the Slayer became one of those legendary 1980s films that had an influence far beyond its initial debut, inspiring others to create their own fantasy films and gaining a huge cult following. Now, as you can see, there is some amazing artwork on the poster. I mean, look at that mullet. It basically looks like Bruce Dickinson. It looks like the cover of an Iron Maiden album. There's Bruce Dickinson with his mullet, those leather trousers. He also appears to be cosplaying as Han Solo just a little bit there.
Yeah, just a small bit.
Now, unfortunately, like many other fantasy movies of the 80s, like Beastmaster,
Which I really like,
Deathstalker, and The Warrior and the Sorceress, the actual film doesn't have the budget to match the expectations of the poster.
The film had an initial negative reception, but has since developed a cult following with fans of the film, including comic book writer Garth Ennis, comedian Bill Bailey and the actor Simon Pegg, leading to the film being referred to in the TV series Spaced.
I punched a bloke in the face once for saying Hawk the Slayer was rubbish.
Good for you.
Yeah, thanks. But that's not the point, Tim. The point is, I was defending the fantasy genre with terminal intensity, when what I should have said is, Dad, you're right. Well, let's give Krull a try, and we'll discuss it later.
So, sequels were planned, but never produced. Until only recently. But,
More on that later.
Yes, once again, I feel that we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. So, let's go on to the plot.
This is a story of heroic deeds and the bitter struggle for the triumph of good over evil, and of a wondrous sword wielded by a mighty hero when the legions of darkness stalk the land.
Voltan infiltrates his father's castle and demands the key to the ancient power, but is denied. I'm guessing that Voltan interrupted bath night because what's with the pink jacuzzi in the middle of the room?
Tell me and I shall let you live. It is my right as your eldest son.
Voltan is the king's oldest son. Okay, so when did the king become a dad? Moments after he was born himself? I'm assuming he's a king, or has some other lofty title, considering that both Hawk and Voltan are referred to as lords. It's hard to say when this character is referred to only as old man in the credits, and that certainly won't be the last time we'll get such lazily named characters.
It would have been more believable if Voltan was the king's brother rather than his eldest son. Freddie Mayne, who played this role, was in fact only 3 years older than Jack Palance, and to be fair, if you're naming your kids Hawk and Voltan, dude, you're asking for trouble.
The wicked Voltan mortally wounds his own father when the latter refuses to turn over the magic of the last elven Mind Stone. As the old man lays dying, his youngest son, Hawk, enters the castle and is bequeathed a great sword with a pommel shaped like a human hand, which attaches itself to the Mind Stone. The sword is now imbued with magical powers and can respond to Hawk's mental commands. Hawk then vows to avenge his father's death by killing Voltan.
As you're about to see, Palance is ridiculously over the top as Voltan, which is really just as well, considering that John Terry shows little to no emotional range throughout, despite actually being the title character. He's about as stiff and about as wooden as an IKEA wardrobe.
The odd thing is that John Terry, not that John Terry, can actually act very well. He was in Full Metal Jacket. He played Felix Leiter in a James Bond film, The Living Daylights. He also played, possibly most well known, Dr. Christian Shepherd in the television series Lost. So he is a good actor, just not in this particular film.
Not in this.
Attempts are made to make Hawk look like a moody, intense badass, but these all fall very short of the mark.
Unfortunately, they do.
Voltan! You will die by the sword.
And that is about as emotional as he gets in the whole entire film. And even then, it's probably just because he's stabbed his own foot by mistake. Not only does Hawk now have the Mind Stone, but he actually also gets his own background music whenever he appears that sounds like it's coming from a Western movie.
Oh, right, the music.
Yeah, now...
I think the words are inappropriately disco for this.
Yes, I would, yes. They definitely went for a kind of like an Ennio Morricone, Dollars trilogy type of thing, but unfortunately what they've actually got is an interesting matchup, I think, between Jeff Wayne's The War of the Worlds and anything by Hawkwind.
Yeah.
It's very upbeat.
It is. It's probably not the type of thing you'd expect to hear in a film that's a dark sort of fantasy sword and sorcery movie of the 80s, when it sounds like some 70s disco that the Bee Gees would write.
The soundtrack is really, really good.
Oh, it's brilliant.
I really like it. And so what we shall now refer to as Hawk's theme is actually really, really nice bit of music. It's just not exactly right.
Yeah, it's not quite appropriate. You could probably see it going in like a sci-fi western like Westworld, which I'm sure we'll get around to doing at some point.
Well, you could say that for 3 years, mate.
You could see it being in a film like Tron, for example, but in a medieval fantasy sword and sorcery film, it just doesn't match. And that kind of adds to the film's overall cheesiness. And funnily enough, the guy that composed the music was also Harry Robertson that co-wrote the film.
Yeah.
So he co-wrote the film, he wrote the music.
Yeah. Wrote the theme tune, sing the theme tune.
Right, wrote the theme tune, sing the theme tune. That's it. Needs to do a gap merengue and also say plus actor on top of that. After the opening credits, during which we see a cartoon hawk flying out of the hilt of the sword.
It's really good.
Yeah.
It's really, really good, actually. Sorry, digressing it. That's really good.
That is good. And we see it again at the end.
Yeah.
So after the opening credits, Voltan torments the whole countryside, leaving entire villages and towns decimated, even killing the women and children. Sounds shocking, doesn't it? But we don't actually see any of that stuff due to the low budget, so you'll just have to take this guy's word on it, Ranulf, who is struggling to run away from Voltan's forces. Ranulf arrives at a remote convent, where he tells the nuns that he managed to survive Voltan's attack on his village and his people. Ranulf was left severely injured as a result of the attack, and despite being nursed back to health by the nuns, he ends up losing one of his hands.
Meanwhile, we see Voltan going into a cave where a dark wizard lives, who performs a spell on his wounded face to ease the constant pain that he's in. Although, let's be honest here, wearing a steel helmet against your face that looks like a cheese grater is probably not going to help your condition much.
There is one who stands between us and the final victory. You will prepare the way for his death.
We should point out at this moment that we never actually find out who the wizard is.
No. Voltan needs to keep popping back to the cave at regular intervals throughout the movie to have some more magical Bond jello applied to his manky face.
Yes, come closer, my pet. Zapping your burns and scars with a laser is nothing like pouring salt in a wound.
Now then, don your cheese grater helmet and run along.
Voltan appears at the convent where Ranulf is resting from his injuries. Not only does he interrupt the nuns' mass and further injure Ranulf, but he also decides to kidnap the Abbess, demanding a large sum of gold as a ransom. After Voltan and his henchmen leave with the Abbess, the nun tells Ranulf to seek out the High Abbot at the fortress of Danesford.
Now, quite what Voltan wants this gold for is never fully explained.
No.
He even says at one point, Voltan owns everything, he owns the land you stand on, he eats the food that you eat. So it's like, right, well, if you own everything...
Why do you want gold?
Yeah, you could just take whatever you wanted.
I, Voltan, want you, old woman.
It's a little bit silly that Jack Palance is calling this nun an old woman repeatedly when she looks considerably younger than he does. I mean, Jack Palance is in his 60s, Annette Crosbie that plays the Abbess is in her 30s at the time, I believe. But apparently age means nothing in this strange place. I mean, look at the age difference between Voltan and his dad. You know. Old woman, hasn't he seen Monty Python?
Old woman! Man, sorry. What knight lives in that castle over there? I'm 37. What?
He could have just called her Dennis.
I didn't know you were called Dennis. Probably best known as Victor Meldrew's long-suffering wife from the TV series One Foot in the Grave. She also voiced the character of Gadriel in Ralph Bakshi's animated version of The Lord of the Rings.
Yes.
She appeared in Black Books as Bill Bailey's mother. And I'd like to think that Bill Bailey was like, right, if I'm going to have a character playing my mum, yeah, I'd like to get Annette Crosbie because she was in Hawk the Slayer. Now, yes, she is playing an older woman in these roles, but here in 1980, she certainly doesn't look old enough to be playing someone who's constantly referred to as an older woman, especially by Jack Palance.
And Palance was, at the time of filming this, only 61, but he was 61, let's be honest with you. Jack Palance made a career out of being in, gangster films, spaghetti westerns. Most of the film's budget probably went on getting his services. And then obviously sort of in the 1980s he'd go on to appear in City Slickers and the 1989 Batman movie. Palance. He was Oscar nominated Best Supporting Actor. His first two films, in 1952 a film called Sudden Fear, and then the year after for a slightly more famous film, which I'll get to in a minute. But he was Oscar nominated Best Supporting Actor for both of those films. And considering that he'd come from the stage, I mean, he'd started out as being on stage in A Streetcar Named Desire as Marlon Brando's understudy. His second Oscar nomination was for the film Shane, because he was the main antagonist in Shane, and which leads to that wonderful scene where he goads a sheep herder to pick up a gun, or as Bill Hicks once said, "Pick up the gun," and then proceeds to shoot him and says, "You all saw him, he had a gun." But throughout Jack Palance's career, he was always a constant presence in American film and also in TV. He would pop up in anything. He seems to have taken on this idea of, this is my job, I have to pay the mortgage, I don't care if it's in a film or in a TV or whatever, I'm going to be I am an actor. This is how I do things. But massively, massively well travelled. If you think it's a bit strange that he's turned up in a very, very, very low budget British sword and sorcery epic, he's been all over the place. He was in the UK, so making films in the 60s, was in France as well, doing things as well. There's a TV movie where he played Dracula, which up until Francis Ford Coppola did his version, it was known as Bram Stoker's Dracula, and it's sort of one of the adaptations that's more closely linked to the book.
And he does have the right face as well to play Dracula or like a vampire. You can just sort of see it in his face.
Well, it's interesting. Gene Colan, who was the artist for Marvel Comics' Tomb of Dracula, basically said, I based my visual interpretation of Dracula on Jack Palance. Jack Kirby, the king of comics, basically said, oh yeah, well, when I was designing Darkseid, Jack Palance was kind of like my... that was my starting point, shall we say, which is great. In the preceding years, he'd actually been in Italy making films, and he was based in Italy. And he, in interviews, Palance always basically said that this was one of the most enjoyable periods of his career, because he was once actually asked about making films in Italy, and he said this: in Italy, everyone on the set has a drinking cubicle, and no one is ever interested in working after lunch. That's a highly civilized way to make a movie.
Hey, they've got the right idea.
It's absolute genius. He finally got his Oscar for Best Supporting Actor in City Slickers in 1981. And after he collected his Oscar, he then basically fell down and started doing one-arm push-ups, which is not too bad for a then 73-year-old man.
Yeah. What a guy!
Absolutely, what a guy. Tell me, Billy Crystal, who was obviously in the movie, he was hosting the Oscars that time. Two things. He said, the first thing he said was, Billy Crystal, I crap bigger than him. And the second one was, looking at Billy Crystal, he says, Billy Crystal, yeah, who would have thought it would be you, pointing to his Oscar, which then turned into a bit of a running gag for the next 2 years or something like that. So Jack Palance just turning up at random places. Absolutely, though, in all seriousness though, wonderful actor. Yes, he can act, honestly. But in this film, he doesn't just chew the scenery, he eats everything up inside like he's Pac-Man.
You promised me all in return for my sword arm.
Oh, I like a man with spirit.
And this place shall be wiped from the face of the land.
Perhaps somebody told him that he was auditioning for a Christmas panto.
Oh, no, he isn't.
In fact, let's take a look at our favourite scenery-chewing bad guys in films. Those that slather the scenery in barbecue and just go at it. So first of all, this will probably be a future episode as well.
Oh, yeah.
Raul Julia as M. Bison in Street Fighter.
Oh,
game over!
Oh. For you, when you met Bison, it was the most important day of your life. For me, it was merely Tuesday.
And he took on that part as well because his kids were huge fans of the video game.
Yeah,
so he must have been having the absolute time of his life. Sadly, that was the last film that Raul Julia worked on and completed.
What a way to go out.
But yeah, I mean, the film itself, it might not be looked at too fondly, although it's gained a cult following over the years. But one thing that everyone has been able to say was, yeah, Raul Julia as M. Bison, he was brilliant.
Right, I take your Raul Julia and I raise you Frank Langella as Skeletor in Masters of the Universe.
Oh yes, we brought this up in the last episode, the season 3 finale. Tell me about the loneliness of good, He-Man. Is it equal to the loneliness of evil? Mwah! Chef's kiss. Sheer Shakespeare is that.
Absolutely superb. However, let us take a moment now. Tim Curry in anything.
Yeah, everything he's ever been in.
Anything he has ever been in. Tim Curry I mean...
Stephen King's It, the Rocky Horror Picture Show, even National Lampoon's Loaded Weapon 1, yeah. And even, not just in films, but in video games, in the Command & Conquer video game series, where he decides to go to the one place that's not corrupted by capitalism.
Space!
That's brilliant. That scene where you know that he's dying.
Yeah.
Oh, dear.
It's like, we should have done another take of that. It's like, nah, fuck it. Alan Rickman as the Sheriff of Nottingham in Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. Again, the villain is played by the best actor in the entire film. Cancel Christmas. You know, bring me a spoon to cut out his heart.
Why a spoon, brother?
Get a spoon, it'll hurt more. Wonderful, lovely, over-the-top pantomime.
Even his death scene, he's kind of like, his death scene is like Paul Rubens is in Buffy the Vampire Slayer. He's like, you half expect him to come up and go, and just every now and again just turn up and you're still not dead, for crying out loud.
And then finally...
Oh, well, this is, as I say, save the best till last. Save the best until last. If you're going to go big, there's only one person that you bring in. You bring in Brian Blessed as Voltan in Flash Gordon.
Are you going to say the line, or shall we say it together?
No. I feel as though...
Or do we just cut to him?
We just cut to him because there's only one man that can do Blessed, and that is Blessed himself.
Brian,
over to you.
Ming's not unbeatable. With all his men, he couldn't even kill Flash.
Gordon's alive? Yes, this is the solemn news that one of our greatest peacetime prime ministers has died. But don't worry, Gordon's alive!
Ranulf arrives at the fortress of Danesford, which is actually a huge painted backdrop, but to be honest with you, as Matt Pagans go, it's really, really good. I really like that. The High Abbot tells him to find the warrior called Hawk and gives Ranulf a token to give him.
By what name is this warrior called?
He is called Hawk.
Meanwhile, our hero, Hawk, rescues a witch from being burnt at the stake and fights off a couple of nasty bandit types.
Yes, they're very much at the burn at the stake now and ask questions later type mentality.
Use your sword, pig! Not fuck me!
Whoa, did he just say you'll not fuck me?
Not fuck me!
Yeah. Moving on.
Was that ever on the cards? As like Hawk gained a bit of a reputation at this point? Oh, don't fuck me, Hawk. I mean, he's got a big fist on that sword.
Moving on very, very swiftly.
Later on in the film, someone says, I have a hard and rewarding task for you, and I just burst out into excessive giggling by that point. But yeah, sorry, moving on.
Moving on. Very, 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 very quickly. God, it's like a carry-on film in here. Hawk is travelling through the land and discovers Ranulf has been captured by brigands who are having a right old laugh by using him in their axe-throwing competition. My God, is he turned into an episode of, what's that computer game? Heimdall. That had an axe-throwing.
Yes, it did, didn't it? Yeah. Oh, I remember that from early episodes of Games Master, yeah.
As you can see, Ranulf isn't really keen on his participation in this game. Luckily, Hawk appears to rescue him and kills off the baddies.
Yes, with a Mexican standoff, but with swords.
Yeah.
In a series of flashbacks throughout the film, and you can tell the flashbacks because they're shot in soft focus, Voltan is jealous of Hawk marrying a woman that he also loves. Voltan plots to kill his brother and take his wife, Eliane, for himself. Eliane is played by Caterina McCall, who's probably best known for her work in Italian horror films, such as Lucio Fucci's City of the Living Dead, The Beyond, and The House by the Cemetery.
Ooh.
Yeah.
She was glutton for punishment.
She really was. Wow. Not just one, but three of them.
Eliane is fearful that Voltan, who used to be friends with her, has become twisted and wicked. She gives Hawk a golden crucifix to wear as protection.
Now remember that game that you mentioned in a previous episode, Spot the Stiff?
Ah, yes.
Where you can just tell it's like, right, that person's going to be dead before the end credits. As soon as Eliane hands over her protective charm to Hawke, it's clear that she won't be sticking around for much
she's
longer.
not sticking around.
It's like when a character goes, when this war's over, I'm going to settle down and marry that girl of mine.
Dead.
Yeah.
Or, what's it? Or somebody that says, oh, how I long for this war to be over. Dead. And if they're not going to die, then there's going to be something happen to them that's going to, it's going to sort of impact their whole life. So, for example, in particular in war films, right, chaps, let's get around the piano. I used to be a concert pianist before the war. Hands blown off. Oh, can't wait to get back home after this war, I just signed professional forms for Voltan in the 1st Division. Yeah, his legs blown off.
Ranulf convinces Hawke to help him rescue the Abbess, so the two of them team up and go to visit the witch that Hawke rescued earlier on in the film. This character doesn't actually have a name, as Hawke literally just calls her Woman, and that's what she's called in the credits as well, Woman. He just walks into a cave, Woman, I need your magic. Alright, don't be a dick about it.
I mean, that does not pass the Bechdel test, really, does it? It's awful.
She's played by Patricia Quinn, who also appeared in the Rocky Horror Picture Show. It's Lady Magenta.
It's Magenta.
It's Lady Magenta. Good lord. And she's in this film.
Well, hang on a minute, wait a second. So we have Older Man. Now we have Woman.
Yes.
Right, okay, so just when you thought that this film was already at, school play levels of production, Hawke and Ranulf then crossed through a dark forest, and it looks like a teacher has been, down the local Houndland before Halloween and bought all the spider webs that they had. The witch, with the power of her colour-changing hula hoops, helps Hawke to assemble, well, I suppose you could say, some sort of fellowship?
So with the help of the witch and her spinning hula hoops that look like something from a Duran Duran music video, Hawke locates each one of his old friends in turn that have fought alongside him before in the past, and we get to see their fighting skills in action. First up is Gort the Giant, who demonstrates why it's never a good idea to bring a sword to a giant hammer fight. Next up is Crow the Elf, a master bowman who follows the typical tropes of having insane archery skills but also doesn't show much in the way of emotion, speaking like he's a Vulcan from Star Trek.
I am ready.
Not only does he speak like a Vulcan from Star Trek, but he also appears to be wearing discount Mr. Spock ears. And finally, there is Baldin the Dwarf, who is skilled with a whip and resides from the Iron Hills of a place called Gimri, which I guess is legally different from saying Gimli.
For each one of these warriors, Hawke shows up at the right time to help them out with a situation that they have inexplicably found themselves in. It is assumed that these warriors all know each other, and they have joined forces before.
Lay down your bows.
By all the gods, Hawke.
Okay, so you're telling me that the dwarf couldn't have freed himself earlier? He literally just needed Hawke to appear before he could escape.
And eat an entire fish whole, like his Gollum from Lord of the Rings. You could just tick off the Lord of the Rings references throughout this film, can't you?
Basically, yes.
So if this was a game of Dungeons and Dragons, then this would be the equivalent of the various characters meeting up with each other to go off on a quest together. Of this group, the giant and the dwarf offer the comic relief as they bicker and argue with each other, like C-3PO and R2-D2. The giant should be quite a familiar face to regular viewers of our show, for he is played by Bernard Bresslaw, most notably famous in the Carry On films, and who has appeared before on an episode of We Need to Talk About ... when we reviewed Carry On Up the Khyber.
At 6'7" and being sort of generally well built, Bresslaw made a career out of playing monsters in various movies and television programmes, including Doctor Who.
Hello there.
He would also appear in other sword and sorcery movies of the 1980s. He was the landlord in Jabberwocky, and he would later play the part of the Cyclops in Krull. But he's probably still best known for appearing in the Carry On film franchise, usually playing the large, scary foreigner, or the gentle giant that was often the best friend of Sid James's character.
To be fair, Bresslaw, apart from the fight scenes, doesn't really act any differently than he does in the Carry On films. I was half expecting Barbara Windsor to turn up at one point in a tiny yellow bikini to do her morning exercises. Ooh, matron.
Not only are Gort and Baldin the comic relief of the film, but it can also be argued that they are the only two people in this film that actually have a character arc. Throughout the film, the two of them will often argue with each other over food, which usually results in Baldin outwitting the much larger warrior for a bigger portion.
What are they? Some kind of fruit?
Fruit, he says.
Well, what are they then?
Those are the finest sugared turkles money can buy.
Turkles?
You long lummox. Turkles. What is it you call them? Lizard's eyeballs.
Before we get to the end of the film, Gort learns to share his food with his companions, and we see their friendship beginning to blossom, just in time for tragedy to occur.
Spoilers.
I apologise.
After their meal of what may or may not be holy food, Hawk and his friends go on a quest to obtain the gold pieces so that the nuns can pay Voltan to have their kidnapped Abbess returned to them.
And although Hawk doesn't believe that Voltan can be trusted and wouldn't release her even if he did have the gold, which does beg the question on why they're actually attempting to get ransom money in the first place if Hawk has no intention of paying it.
In another flashback, Voltan plans to kill Hawk to take Eliane for himself, but after sunlight catches off Hawk's crucifix to Voltan's eyes to temporarily distract him, Eliane manages to rescue Hawk by burning Voltan's face with a flaming torch. Unfortunately, she is fatally wounded by a crossbow bolt in the back as they make their escape, and Eliane later dies in Hawk's arms, which I suppose explains why he's such a moody bugger throughout the rest of the film.
To obtain the gold, Hawk and his friends decide to pay a visit to a local hunchbacked slave trader who is absolutely disgusting and eats with his mouth full. The hunchback isn't keen on helping Hawk resolve their problems peacefully, so it's fight time.
Greetings.
I don't know what you're doing here, but you've chosen the wrong time to do it.
My apologies. I have an urgent request to make.
Request?
I find myself in need of 2,000 gold pieces, and have been told that that boat contains sufficient for my cause. I shall need your help to unload it.
It's a jest. That's a good one.
It's no jest.
The elf and the crossbow guy can both shoot arrows really fast through the power of quick editing. It just looks like they decided to play a fast animated GIF at this part of the film. I'm surprised that the rapid-fire machine gun crossbow isn't attached to Ranulf's stump like
Ash's chainsaw.
Ash's chainsaw, Army of Darkness.
Gort decides to punish the hunchback by placing him in the sort of death trap that the Joker would have put Batman and Robin in during the 1960s. The hunchback slave trader is unable to keep his mouth shut for any short or any sort of extended period of time, which is questionable considering that all his men were wiped out in about 10 seconds, and as a result he gets killed off in a pretty grisly fashion, to say that Hawk and his friends are meant to be the good guys in all of this. Oh, and although you don't see any blood or gore, because at the end of the day this is PG rated.
It's PG rated? Then how do you explain this?
No, fuck me.
Anyway, moving on again. It is to be argued that the actions of Hawk and his party have been just as bad as those of Voltan and his forces. Yes, they talk about the ends justifying the means, but a lot of men have ended up dead in this scene just to obtain some ransom money that Hawk doesn't intend on paying anyways. And yes, the hunchback was a nasty type, and so is Gort for putting him in a makeshift death trap that Jigsaw from the Saw films would be proud of.
In contrast, Voltan's actually looking after the Abbess. He's got her locked up in what appears to be a giant rabbit hutch for some reason, so I can only imagine he's giving her fresh water and a carrot every day. Also, at no point does Hawk even attempt to give Voltan the gold to pay for the freedom of the Abbess. He just keeps hold of it for himself. Although I suppose that is fairly accurate to most Dungeons and Dragons parties.
He might be waiting to roll a double six.
Oh, I can't pay Voltan the gold yet. I've got to roll a double six in order to do that. So,
wait a second. I'll say. Let me just wait a second. Let me just roll for generosity. 0. No, keep it to yourself.
Voltan's son, Drago, has a disagreement with his father and is determined to prove that he is just as mighty a warrior as him, although that's not quite how he describes it.
And then, Voltan, we'll see who is the lord of the dance.
No.
No.
That's Michael Flatley.
Yes. Meanwhile, Voltan has popped off to the cave again for another spot of crystal treatment, whilst Drogo goes against his father's wishes and takes some men to the convent to confront Hawk. Drogo actually introduces himself to Hawk, which is kind of odd, because surely, dude, that's your uncle.
That's Uncle Hawk.
That's Uncle Hawk. Hawk, that's your nephew, Drogo. Have you never met before?
I did not make myself clear. I came for the gold. I am no messenger. But I will give you a message. The message of death!
Well, hang on a minute. So, you're not a messenger, but you're taking a message anyway, but doesn't that then make you a messenger? So you've just said that you're not a messenger, but you're bringing a message anyways, but by saying that you're dull, my brain's hurting.
I think you're giving it more thought than what the scriptwriters did.
Oy.
I will say this, that is how you do a death threat. That's how you do a death threat in a movie. It sounds like a line from a Godfrey Ho Ninja movie. The only way that could be any more threatening would be if it was delivered by a bootleg Transformer toy from the local Poundland, or if the threat was given whilst the receiver was using a Garfield telephone.
We're not doing another Godfrey Ho movie. We're not doing one. Once was bad enough. We're not going there again. Drogo is mortally wounded by Hawk during the battle, and his men take him back to camp, where he dies in Voltan's arms, leading to Jack Palance hamming it up even more.
Drogo!
Huh, so it turns out that Drogo was a messenger after all.
See, told you.
Now you would have thought that surely after all this, Voltan would just go ahead and kill the Abbess anyway. But he still keeps her alive even after all this. He's probably even changed the straw a few times by now. Instead he decides to kill a few more of his men, which just seems like a really unsafe working environment. You know, you could just see his men sort of going, was this, did I agree to this? Was this part of the contract when we signed up?
Exactly. I tell you something, Voltan's men, they should form some sort of union with stormtroopers.
Yes, they should. Unsafe working conditions.
Absolutely.
And the boss keeps killing them off at random intervals.
Yeah.
The gold is here, and I am here.
Yes. Thank you, Hawk. Nothing like stating the bleeding obvious. Enraged, Voltan confronts the heroes at the convent and tries to sound threatening despite his horse getting restless and decided to walk around in circles. Hawk and his friends, with the help of the witch, using a smoke spell, attack Voltan's camp and look to even the odds in their favour, although they are forced to leave without the Abbess when Voltan threatens to kill her. Although, wouldn't we have just done that anyway after they've left? With the help of a turncoat nun, wow, Hawk and friends are left incapacitated, and Voltan and his remaining forces are able to capture the team. The nun is thanked by Voltan with a quick dagger to the chest shortly afterwards.
Curse your sudden but inevitable betrayal.
Right, okay. How the hell did Voltan and all his men, all decked out in armour, manage to sneak into the church without waking everyone up? I know that the giant had been knocked out by a sleeping drug that the turncoat nun had put in his beer, but everybody else?
Yeah,
come on.
Surely it's a bit loud.
Well, amount of shuffling and rattling they would have made.
Rattling and the horses, you know. Notice that Gort hands the nun the cup back before he collapses. So I'm guessing that they only had the one cup.
Well, it was only a £600,000 budget. It's like, Bernard, we've got the one cup.
Yeah. Make sure you hand it back.
Hand it back before you fall over. Bernard Bresslaw actually injured his back and neck on his armour in the scene where he fell over after the nun drugged him. When we went to the open night to see Excalibur at the Royal Armouries last year, and Terry English, the head armourer, was doing the chat, he was talking that there was various different sets of armour. There was like armour for like standing around in looking good. Yeah. There was armour for like doing stunts in, for rolling around, for fighting in and what have you. So there was different armour types for different sort of situations. Now I'm guessing the budget didn't extend to that. They had one set of armour and that was it. So which probably explains how Bernard Bresslaw was injured when the arm basically jutted into his neck as he fell over. And he wasn't the only person to get injured during the film, and we'll talk about that later.
So Voltan attempts to torture Hawk to find out where the gold is, but ends up mortally wounding Baldin instead.
They killed the dwarf?
Yeah.
You bastards!
We must free ourselves.
Yes, again, nothing like stating the bleeding obvious there, Hawk. By the way, any chance of you actually using the power of the Mind Sword at any point to free yourself and your friends? I mean, any time before the dwarf got stabbed would have been ideal.
And seeing as Baldin had the chance to give Voltan a good kicking in the face before he was stabbed, the Dark Lord has had to pop off to the cave for another round of facial treatment. Where exactly is this wizard that Voltan keeps going off to see, and how does he get there so quickly?
Well, he's been there a few times now, he must just fast travel.
I was... Walked into that one.
Yes.
But luckily, help is at hand, as the witch turns up once again to rescue Hawk and his friends, and it looks like she's been down the local Poundland as well, as she uses what appears to be silly string to help them escape. This poor sod is covered in what appears to be about 20 cans worth of silly string, which seems to have freezing properties, as it just stands there frozen for the rest of the scene.
Poor bugger, it's like, right, you just stay there.
Stand there.
Baldin dies from his injuries, and the heroes attend a short funeral for him where he ends up in a coffin that looks similar to the one that belonged to a certain Disney princess. No doubt this is to set things up for the spin-off film, Baldin the Dwarf and the Seven Snow Whites.
I don't even want to know what genre that film is. The heroes now attack the convent for the last time for Hawk to exact his revenge on Voltan. The witch really goes all out for this battle, as she has included a snow machine and a load of colour-changing ping-pong balls in her bag of tricks to aid Hawk and the other heroes in their attack.
But the attack doesn't go as well as the heroes planned. Ranulf is killed, as is one of the nuns that tried to save Gort from suffering the same fate. Crow is also left injured, so now Hawk is left without both of his overpowered bowmen. Well, he's knackered now. I'm not being funny, they're the ones that's done all the killing.
Yeah, exactly, they've been on Overwatch. Hawk takes down Voltan's men relentlessly before confronting Voltan, who has managed to get Gort and the Abbess's sisters, as prisoners. Hawk asks for them to be set free in exchange for Hawk to be Voltan's prisoner. Voltan agrees, but commands Hawk to throw down his sword, remove his armour, and pray to any god that might listen.
It turns out that the protective charm that Eliane gave Hawk all that time has a hidden blade, and Hawk uses it to free Gort. The two of them fight Voltan's remaining men, killing them all. Now it's just down to Voltan and Hawk. Voltan finally realises that Hawk has the ancient power that he wanted at the start of the film.
So, you have found the power which is rightly mine. 10,000 times have I dreamed of killing you slowly.
Yeah, he's not kidding about that. This entire fight scene is in slow motion. Well, I guess that's one way of getting the film to a 90-minute running time. Hawk defeats his evil brother in battle, and afterwards we finally see his damaged face, and again they probably didn't have the budget to show this grisly injury in the way that had been referred to throughout the film.
Hawk and Gort travel off to find new adventures, leaving Crow to be tended to by the nuns, whilst the Dark Wizard arrives to carry off Voltan's dead body. Again, who is that? We never find out. In these next couple of scenes, a sequel is teased.
Your sleep of death will not last long.
Yeah, well, it's been about 40 years now, so it has actually rather been a long time.
We shall meet again, bearer of the Mind Sword.
Probably not for a while, I should think. And then we get an explosion, and we get the cartoon Hawk once again flying towards the screen as the film comes to an end. A rather abrupt end. It's almost as mad and as sudden an ending to a Godfrey Ho film.
Again, you mentioned Godfrey Ho, it's not happening.
So, good lord, we have reached that point in the review where we've gone through the whole film, and we sit back as the end credits roll and we think to ourselves, what have we watched here?
Yeah. What exactly have we watched here? Right. Let's.
Where do we begin? Where do we begin?
Where do we begin? It is unashamedly low budget.
Oh yes.
Unashamedly low budget.
To the point where you feel that health and safety wasn't exactly a factor on the set of the film. We mentioned Bresslaw getting injured in the scene where he fell over after the nun drugged him. Patricia Quinn, who played the witch, actually burnt her hands on one scene when too much flash powder was used during the glowing rainbow magic.
Oh wow!
And Jack Palance was actually injured during the final battle with Hawk. The bit where he sort of slashes him there, he actually broke the skin and cut Jack Palance there.
Oh!
But he still carried on going and he finished the take, and afterwards Teddy Marcel was like, "You alright there, Jack?" He's like, "Oh yeah, I'm fine. Oh actually, yeah, no."
But again, it's Jack Palance.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
Now, as you can imagine with the way that the movie ended, there was the intention of making a sequel to this.
The sequel was referred to in the US magazine Ciné Fantastique in its autumn issue in 1980, and Marcel was quoted as saying, "I'll be going on a trip looking for locations for the next one. Whether ITC does it or not, we will be making Hawk the Destroyer in February 1981. So that was incredibly optimistic that he could actually make the film without the main financer. In 2015, a sequel titled Hawk the Hunter was reported to be in development with a budget of $5 million.
Yeah, sadly, the intended beginning of filming was postponed when the crowdfunding on Kickstarter wasn't successful.
No,
which is a shame because I probably would have chucked the production a few quid for this.
I would have put in a couple of quid for it.
As long as I got a part.
Absolutely.
In an unexpected twist, this year we did eventually get the sequel, sort of,
kinda,
as a comic book.
Yeah.
Rebellion, who are the Oxford-based sort of publishers and owners of British cult comic 2000 AD, home of such characters as Judge Dredd, Slane, Rogue Trooper, commissioned a continuation of the story. And there's some serious names behind this. You've got none other than Garth Ennis, who we said before was a massive fan of Hawk the Slade, the guy that wrote The Boys, which is now a huge series on Amazon.
Yeah.
He wrote Preacher. He's writing this, he's at the helm. You've got Henry Flint, sort of doing the artwork.
And Henry Flint's really good.
Yeah, and the covers, not this particular cover, but when it gets sort of published as a standalone issue, the covers are going to be done by Magic the Gathering artist Greg Staples. So a 6-issue miniseries will begin in April, but the series has actually been the bag supplement with issues of Judge Dredd magazine since January of 2022.
The comic actually does take place after the movie, with Hawk and going off on more adventures together, and obviously without the budget limitations that the film had, the comic is able to be a little bit gorier, shall we say, than the original film.
Yes.
The witch's magic now actually, looks good. Even the silly string. Voltan is resurrected by the Dark Wizard that we never actually saw in the movie, and it turns out that there are several of them now. Voltan's time spent being dead hasn't done his skin condition any favours at all, to the point where he's well beyond any type of healing this time round.
Yep.
And it's
no healing crystals this time round. Even Gwyneth Paltrow can't save you this time.
Even with her goop. I don't think we can understate how much we enjoyed this film.
Oh yeah, even though Hawk himself as a hero, he's not very good, is he?
He's not.
He's a bit crap as a hero.
He's I mean, yeah, he's not really a hero.
No.
He only gets involved because he wants to kill Voltan.
Of his party, the two archers are the ones that do by far the most effective attacks, and they both end up either dead or injured. The witch is more effective than he is. She basically saves everyone in Hawk's party. And let's be honest, the Mind Sword, That's probably more of a character than what Hawk is.
And to be fair, it probably shows more emotional range than Hawk.
It probably does.
What manner of man are you?
I'm called Hawk.
Hawk?
Yes. We know the limitations of Hawk the Slayer as a movie, but it's a great, great film. It's enjoyable.
I would say it's the type of film you might not necessarily want to watch on your own, but get a few mates together, get a few beers in, watch it together, and you will have a wonderful, wonderful time with Hawk the Slayer.
Yeah, it's a great, great film. There's nothing more we can actually say about that. It's just a wonderful, joyous film to actually watch. So enjoy it. We know the daftness of it and the plot holes and Jack Palance nuking the scenery from orbit, because at the end of the day, it's the only way to be sure.
Leave a like, leave a comment.
Please do.
Share this across your social media.
Yeah. We'd love if you do that.
Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done already. And we will catch you again for another episode of We Need to Talk About ...
Have a lovely evening, everybody, and we'll see you soon.
We'll catch you soon.
He is called Hawk.